Captain's Log. It's our mission to discuss the adventures of the USS Enterprise, their exploration of strange new worlds, and their mission to boldly go where no one has gone before. Hello everyone, today I decided to share my favorite Star Trek films. Now, this is going to greatly differ from your list out there, so please be respectful when sharing your favorite Star Trek films. I have to say, I actually enjoy every Star Trek movie that's been made. I don't really have a least favorite, even though there are some that are better than others. This will probably go from favorite to most favorite. Here we go. Starting off is Star Trek Insurrection. This is the 9th film of the series and the 3rd of the Next Generation crew. After First Contact, this was quite a step down, and the production value made it feel like a TV episode of the Next Generation. But it does explore themes we've seen on the series before, such as in the episode Homeward. It's not as dark as Generations or First Contact, but the story itself is pure Star Trek, and quite an underrated one at that. And of course, the villain is played by F. Murray Abraham.
He killed Mozart!
In a movie?
And this involves an immortal race called the Baku that are on this planet. There's some properties on this planet that basically rejuvenate cells and cause people to live forever and stay young. So it's kind of cool seeing this group of people. Then you also have the Sona, and they're like these plastic surgery rejects. They don't have the regenerative cells as their counterparts, the Baku. So it's interesting seeing what's going on this planet, the relocation, the Federation's involvement, and something very wrong with the Sonya. And that's cool. The Next Generation, it isn't about like saving the galaxy or stopping this war entirely. It's about relocating 600 people and doing the right thing. And that, in essence, is like a Star Trek The Next Generation episode. There's much more humor here, silly moments with Data and Worf. And it is kind of interesting seeing how the Next Generation crew reacts to being around this planet. They start feeling young, they start feeling moody, they start de-aging. Riker shaves. You get to see Worf go through a lot of crazy stuff. It's nice seeing Geordi regain his vision. There's such a heartfelt moment. Overall, while this isn't among the best Star Trek films, it is a pure Star Trek story, and it's nice seeing the crew on this side adventure. And this is the first time we've seen CGI ships and CGI space backgrounds before. I think Blue Sky Effects did this, so it wasn't done by ILM because of their work on Phantom Menace at the time. I remember seeing this in theaters. I didn't like it quite as much as First Contact, but it has grown with me over the years. My brother took me to go see this. We thought we were going to see the Phantom Menace trailer, and we saw Austin Powers kind of do a Star Wars spoof, but overall, it's not one of the stronger Next Generation entries, but it does feel close to the spirit of the Next Generation show, to say the least. After that is Generations. This is the passing of the torch from the original series to the Next Generation, and in many ways, like Insurrection, feels like a TNG episode in a bigger budget. I do like the opening that's 80 years before the Next Generation. We get to see the Enterprise B be sent off, not fully loaded, at least not until Tuesday, so to speak. Alan Ruck's the captain. We get to see Sulu's daughter. And to send off the Enterprise B, we have Chekhov, Scotty, and Captain Kirk there. Something goes wrong with this nexus, and we get to see Whoopi Goldberg's character from the Next Generation, as well as Malcolm McDowell's Saren. He's the villain here, and he is excellent in this movie. And his motivations are quite valid, I say. It's sad. He wants to see his family. He lost his family, and there's this nexus force field that has no space and time. Time is irrelevant in this nexus. So the Enterprise B is in peril, and Captain Kirk saves the day, and he dies. He gets blasted out into space, or so we think. And then we get to the Next Generation crew. There's a lot of humor here with Data's emotion chip, the holodeck, but I like seeing Saren team up with these extremist Klingons that are outside the Empire and want to destroy the Federation. There's much more humor here, but in many ways it has sort of that classic Trek feel. You could definitely tell they try to get the elements of the first 6 films and the Next Generation put together. And it's sad that Picard loses some of his family members, with his brother and nephew. And this is really a story about time and death, not only with Kirk's character, but Picard and Saren, and what makes people different and how they deal with death. So we get to see Picard investigate this Saren character who they find injured and he's a person that can live over 300 years, he's a different type of race. So it's nice seeing him try to figure out the mystery behind Sauron and the mystery of this nexus. And it's a ballsy movie. They fail, actually. They fail outright. The Enterprise gets destroyed. There's that awesome scene with the Enterprise D just like crashing into the planet with just a saucer portion. And then Picard failing. The Nexus happens, this star is destroyed, and it kills billions of people. And this is where the film gets kind of true to like Star Trek and philosophy here, with like the Nexus and Picard imagining himself have children in the future, seeing his nephew alive, but then knowing that it's not real. So they need somebody to help him defeat Sauron, and that's where he meets Captain Kirk. From his perspective, just derived from the events we saw at the beginning of the film, and I love their scenes together. Could have been more epic, absolutely, but I do love him saying, like, whatever you do, do not let them take you out of that captain's seat, you know? Because we saw Captain Kirk become Admiral, and he was just miserable, you know? And being captain of the Enterprise is what he loved most. And he tells Picard, as captain of the Enterprise, never let them take you out of that chair. And we get this cool battle. Again, Kirk has always been more physical than Picard in many ways, at least how they portrayed them. And Kirk dies heroically, not on the bridge of the Enterprise, but a bridge on him, so to speak. It's crazy how him and Han Solo both died on a bridge in their 7th installments, but William Shatner's acting here is just so underrated, of like, oh my. And then Picard learning a lesson about the predator of time and learning to cherish each moment. Overall, this is not a bad start to the Next Generation films, and it's quite a highlight, an underrated one at that. After that is Star Trek: The Motion Picture. Now, this is one film that I found to be the most boring out of the bunch, and probably at one point wasn't my most favorite. That is until I saw the 4K remastered director's cut this last year. This film is Star Trek at its purest. It's pretty much Star Trek meets 2001: Space Odyssey. Yes, there are many shots of the Enterprise. They have weird pajamas. It's slow. But the ideas and the philosophy behind the story is pure Trek at its finest. And I love seeing the crew return in this phase 2, so to speak. We have Stephen Collins as Decker, who is the captain of the Enterprise, but Kirk kind of takes over with his own ego in a way. And then you have Paris Kambata as Elia, who later on becomes a messenger for V'ger, an Earth artifact sent out to gather information, and these sentient beings like programmed it to gather more information, but it doesn't want to complete its processing until it joins with the Creator. It was a cool twist that V'ger turned out to be Voyager 6. I like that. It takes a while to get there, but after the first half of the movie, it becomes a very intriguing film, to say the least. Beautiful visual effects. Robert Wise directed this. Of course, he's an editor on Citizen Kane. And, you know, this is one film that I was not aware that it didn't have a special effects done. You know, it lost a year of production due to, like, poor effects, and they had to rush it for a Christmas release. So it was never a finished film. And watching the director's cut, you can tell that with the space opening and the different visual effects. There are some effects I actually kind of like more in the theatrical than I do in the director's cut, but the pacing is so much better in the director's cut with some added scenes, especially with Spock. And I have to say, while not being like my most favorite, it still is an underrated movie, and if you're in the mood to watch it, despite it being slow and sluggish, it is Star Trek at its finest, and I kind of wish we got back to this more philosophical side of Gene Roddenberry's Star Trek. You know, other films try to imitate it, but never quite got there. And this is also one of the few films in the series that has a level of scope. And that's one thing I do respect about this movie, even though it might not be the most entertaining. Next up is Star Trek V: The Final Frontier. While many consider it the worst of the Star Treks, I actually kind of enjoy this one, believe it or not, even to some degree more than the motion picture. But it's kind of like Insurrections and Generation in a way that, like, this is almost similar to the motion picture, but instead of like an AI sentient being, they're after this ancient being who is believed to be God. What does God need with a starship, you know? Lawrence Luckenbill plays Sybok, and he's pretty much like this televangelist Vulcan who is Spock's half-brother. They add a bit more to the canon there. There are some silly moments, you know, on Nimbus 3, these ambassadors there, Uhura, luring the troops there. There's some silly stuff. The jet boots, but I like it. William Shatner directs this, and he has some big ideas, and it's a shame that the visual effects weren't the best, because I think if they redid this one like they did motion picture, this might be regarded higher among fans. And it definitely did try to get more of that humor from Star Trek 4, even with Scotty, the Enterprise not working. But One thing I have to say about the original films is that they always try to do something different. And even though they may have not landed 100%, this took a big swing. And it has some underrated moments from the series, not only with like the friendship of Spock and Kirk and the revelation of Cybok's existence, but also Cybok taking over the Enterprise and basically brainwashing the crew. Bones. Oh my God. McCoy has such a sad story with his father and the cure of that disease and stuff. Spock's backstory, and then also Kirk not believing Cybok, saying, no, I don't want my pain taken away. We need our pain.
We lose them, we lose ourselves. I don't want my pain taken away. I need my pain.
So that's interesting because it's about the human condition and experiences, and without our experiences, we're not human, and we're not the people we are, you know? And also seeing the Enterprise just travel a little bit off the center of the galaxy in search of this God through the Great Barrier. This being that's not really God. There's so much to be said there. And you do have some silly Klingon moments, but some funny lines where it's like, please, Captain, not in front of the Klingons. It's a bit of a departure from the other ones, but I do like its lightheartedness with the dark elements. It has a very much a Dune, Star Wars, Mad Max vibe. And perhaps it's not the most Star Trek. Even though the ideas are Star Trek, the way it's presented feels like it should be another sci-fi series. But I like it for the 80s movie it is, and I have to say I'm quite a fan of Bones, Spock, and Kirk singing Row, Row, Row You Boat, camping by Yosemite, you know? I don't know. There's something about this movie where I just enjoy it, but maybe it's a passage of time. Maybe it's seeing sci-fi films now that I look at it and I'm like, it's not as good as like number 6, 2, or 4, but it's not like the worst thing I've ever seen either. It's underrated in many ways. Next up is Star Trek Nemesis. This is the last of the TNG films, and I have to say, while not being perfect, I really enjoyed this film when it came out. My mother and I went to go see it in 2003, and I thought this was a significant upgrade to Insurrection. Perhaps we could have focused more on Picard and the crew, but I like seeing young Tom Hardy as Shinzon, seeing this coup in the Romulan Senate, and basically seeing him set out to destroy Picard. You know, he's dying, and he was sent on this mission to replace Picard, but that mission can no longer be taken place until he kills Picard. So that's like his whole purpose, is just all-out destruction of not only Captain Picard, but the Federation and Earth. So that's kind of cool. I like seeing the Scimitar ship, the Birds of Prey. That's the one redeeming factor about this. We're also introduced to a similar robot of Data called B4, and we get the union of Troy and Riker as they're married. Some great cameos at the beginning. Even though it doesn't have its fans, I consider it as one of the better Next Generation films, and quite underrated. Star Trek III, The Search for Spock. This is an excellent follow-up to Wrath of Khan. Christopher Lloyd is underrated as the villain, and of course Leonard Nimoy directs this installment, the first of his directorial debuts in Star Trek's film series, and I have to say, this is a cool movie dealing with Genesis and like Spock being resurrected, the repercussions of what happened in Wrath of Khan, dealing with the Federation, and Kirk basically, as always, going against orders to do the right thing and to save his friend. The needs of the one outweigh the needs of the many in this case. Seeing this like renegade Klingon want to basically go after the Federation thinking they have a weapon, wants to know the secrets of Genesis, and there's some serious repercussions here. Kirk's son gets killed. It has a lot that weighs heavily into the later films, such as Undiscovered Country. The Bird of Prey is introduced with the Klingon cloak ship, originally meant to be a Romulan ship, and now the Klingons have cloaking devices. There's so much in this movie that's kind of like paved the way for future installments and the TV shows. There's so much that was set up in this one film when you think about it. And while it's not as exciting as Wrath of Khan, I feel like it's an underrated entry, all the way to the back and forth between the two crews, the self-destruction of the Enterprise, and then that final battle. I have had enough of you! You gotta love William Shatner's acting as Kirk. Oh man. This is just a fun Star Trek adventure that has an amazing ending with the resurrection of Spock. Such a satisfying conclusion to the two-part arc of Wrath of Khan. Next up is Star Trek Into Darkness. Star Trek Into Darkness is basically a retread of Wrath of Khan and the episode Space Seed from the original series. I love the 2009 film. This one, while not as good, I still think is entertaining in its own way. Benedict Cumberbatch makes this film as Khan. I just love that revelation.
My name is Khan.
The only thing that this does, though, is I feel like it creates a cynical attitude. They try to Empire Strikes Back Star Trek. Kirk loses rank of the Enterprise. The band's broken up. Scotty gets sent off somewhere, so Chekhov has to be in engineering. Like, it just pretty much try to undo everything that was done at the end of the first Star Trek, to the point where if you skip this one and go straight to Star Trek Beyond from Star Trek '09, you wouldn't really miss much. That being said, though, it is worth it for the ending. Peter Weller is great as Admiral Marcus in that USS Vengeance. Oh my god, that is such a crazy ship. And it's kind of cool how they introduced Carol Marcus in this. Again, a lot of retread, and that's probably part of the problem. JJ did what he did with Star Wars on this film, of retreading the past, and it's just when you create a reboot timeline, an alternate Kelvin timeline, where anything is possible, why go over the past again? That being said, though, it was a nice alternate version of Space Seed and Wrath of Khan, and I enjoyed Spock's cameo, where he's just like, I told you I wasn't going to tell you anything about your future. That being said, Khan was one of the most deadliest enemies that the Enterprise has ever faced. So, like, the fact that he told Spock that about Khan and everything tells you how big of a bad he was and how much it scarred Ambassador Spock in his past. Overall, this is just a fun movie. And while it has some lighthearted humor, it does have some emotional moments with Kirk's death and the whole fight at the end. A very large scope. In many ways, feels more Star Wars than Star Trek. After that is Star Trek Beyond. Star Trek Beyond was a return to form after Into Darkness, and probably one of my favorite of the new Star Trek films, really. I love that they went with the original story. I love that they followed the 5-year journey. Chris Pine feels more like Kirk than ever before, and it's crazy because he didn't try to imitate William Shatner, yet he embodies the essence of Captain Kirk, especially young Captain Kirk. It's like when you see actors play Dracula or Hamlet, you know. They're all different, they do their own take, but they embody a certain element of that character, and that's what Chris Pine does here, as well as the rest of the cast. Carl Urban as Bones is like down to a T. He did his homework. Zachary Quino as Spock, and it's nice seeing them deal with this trap, you know. Idris Elba as an early captain before the Federation was really formed. It was more military. I like seeing that twist. Justin Lin knocks it out of the park in this film. The new characters are just as good as the returning cast, and everybody has something to do. It feels like the crew of the Enterprise, you know, and the band's together. Even though they're drifted apart in the trap, they're all together, and they have to stop this attack on the space station of Yorktown. Such a cool revelation, and how they deal with the loss of Leonard Nimoy and Ambassador Spock. I love that moment with the cast photo from Star Trek V. Such a heartfelt moment. This felt true to not only Star Trek, but embodied the more action-packed elements of modern Trek with the Kelvin timeline. After Star Trek Beyond is Star Trek IV The Voyage Home. Star Trek IV The Voyage Home is such a great entry, a fun one at that, with time travel where they have to help a dying planet. There's no more whales, so they have to go find a whale in San Francisco in 1986. Oh my god, there's so much fun here in present day, dealing with like currency and how like the economy and world of the Federation works. And also seeing the Enterprise with the Klingon Warbird. You know, they don't have the Enterprise, so they're on the Warbird in this installment. Seeing the scientist character, the marine biologist who's dealing with the whales. Her revelation of like finding out that these people are from the future. Seeing Spock, everybody, the way they're dressed, the humor there, the part on the bus is awesome. So funny that even Picard Season 2 paid homage to it. There's a lot of funny humor here, and you kind of needed that lightheartedness after 2 and 3. Again, the series, when you look at it, it has a pattern of having more lighthearted entries after the darker, more serious entries. But this one still has stakes, and it's about them saving the future, which they do, and it's a wonderful film, directed by Leonard Nimoy. Some great moments of humor. Would you like to have some Italian or some spaghetti or whatever, some Italian food? He's like, yes, no, yes. Between Kirk and Spock, it's just hilarious. Yeah, I like 3 and 4 in the way that everybody in the Enterprise kind of has something to do, and again proves that some of the even ones are better than the odd entries. Next up after that is Star Trek VI The Undiscovered Country. This is one hell of a conclusion for the original series crew. I love this movie, all the way from its opening score to the story, them trying to make peace with the Klingons. Of course we know that's possible because we see Lieutenant Worf in Star Trek The Next Generation, but like here, Kirk has to put aside his feelings after the death of his son. They both have kind of preconceived notions of each other. And Star Trek always does best when it goes over human philosophical stories or stuff that's going on at the moment. And this really goes over racism in a way. And it shows you that in this future, humanity is the best of the best, everybody regardless of what background. And this continues that with two different races of like humans and Klingons. And that's one thing I really love about this. It's the undiscovered country of peace, this new revolution of change. And what happens when people are afraid of change, whether it be on the Federation side or on the Klingon side. And there's this assassination, how that goes down, and they frame the Enterprise, Kirk and them. Christopher Plummer is just awesome. Awesome as Chang in this one. To be or not to be. Seeing Sulu as a captain of the Excelsior and how he helps out is just amazing. The shapeshifter in this, the Kirk fight, everything about this is so intriguing and entertaining. It is just Star Trek at its finest, and I cannot think of a better ending for the original series crew than in this installment. It's just beautiful from start to finish and among one of the best Star Trek films. Next up is Star Trek First Contact, Resistance is Futile. I love this with the Borg. This is finally a film that is like a next generation film. It's kind of like Generations, a motion picture, how they start off stuff, but then they get a villain or enemy from the TV show in the second installment, and this one just goes Wrath of Khan. But instead of Khan, we have the Borg. And then they add the Borg Queen. This movie set up a lot of elements you would see in this TV show, Star Trek Voyager, and the last season of Picard. In many ways, it's cool seeing a Borg Queen. And in other ways, I was like, I kind of liked them before they had a queen. But I'm not complaining. Any Borg content is amazing content, and I love that opening fight. And this is a new Enterprise. After the Enterprise D failed, it's the Enterprise E. Seeing them fight this Borg cube is just so awesome. And then the Borg basically losing and creating a temporal vortex to go back in time. The Enterprise following them and realizing that they're going to try to stop First Contact and create 9 billion Borg on Earth. So they have to go back and make sure Zephyr Cochrane launches his ship and that the Vulcans can see it so they can have First Contact. Because otherwise, there won't be a Federation. And that's so cool. It gets some of the best elements of previous movies and puts it into one movie. Jonathan Frakes directs this, and this one just feels like a fine, polished film compared to the other Next Generation films. Something about this just fired on all cylinders. And I remember seeing this on VHS. That's right, VHS. I have it. Seeing Picard basically just lose it, you know. It's just like they assimilate our space and we fall back. They assimilate entire worlds and we fall back. Not this time. Not anymore. The line must be drawn here. This far, no farther. And I will make them pay for what they've done. You know, that moment with the whole Captain Ahab speech. Alfred Woodward is great in this film. And, oh man, it's just an awesome movie. Seeing how they deal with the Borg adapting throughout the ship. And this ticking time bomb of will they or will they not succeed in the launch and First Contact. And that confrontation with Data and the Borg Queen and Picard is just fantastic at the end of this film. All around, this is one of the best. And again, another even entry. Next up is Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. Khan! I love that part. Ricardo Montalban is amazing returning as Khan. Seeing the repercussions of what happened after Space Seed onto this crew. Admiral Kirk going back and fighting Khan. The revelation of him having a son with Dr. Marcus. There's so much that is done here, but Khan and Kirk don't really meet face to face, so to speak, physically, but their presence is still felt. And then the battles too. I just love that part where it's just like, buried alive, buried alive. He's like, Khan! Yes, I know, I keep saying that, but such an awesome moment from William Shatner, seeing him deal with his enemy. The first time we heard about the Kobayashi Maru test, Kirstie Alley, that late great Kirstie Alley here as a Vulcan. And I like this cat and mouse game that Khan and Kirk are playing. The discovery of the Genesis Project, the fights they have are just awesome with Industrial Light and Magic's effects. And then we get the sad sacrifice of Spock. He's like, you are and you always shall be my friend, you know. That scene is just so tragic. And this is before you know they're going to resurrect him in the next movie. Like, this seemed definite. And it was quite a sad moment. A moment that defined not only Spock, but Kirk as well. That this enemy from the past managed to do this. Like, they won, but still lost in many ways. Oh man, this is Star Trek at its finest, and Wrath of Khan, after all these years, might still be the best Star Trek film. I think it is the best Star Trek film. Tied at number 2 for me is Picard Season 3. If Star Trek Picard Season 2 is like Voyage Home, this was like elements of Wrath of Khan meets The Undiscovered Country, even down to Christopher Plummer's daughter, Amanda Plummer, playing a changeling villain. The revelation of, Beverly Crusher and Picard having a son, Jack Crusher, that was just major. The whole battle here, Picard is an elderly man, but seeing how he slowly comes back to being the old Picard when the battles start, seeing him aboard the USS Titan, the revelation of the captain there and what Picard did when he was a Borg. The whole twist with the changelings and then the new Borg. That whole ending, the last 2 episodes are just some of the finest Star Trek I've seen in years. And it was amazing seeing everybody come back with their own story. Geordi come back, as like this kind of like person that's over archives at this museum. Him resurrecting the Enterprise D was just incredible. Having 2 daughters, seeing 7 and 9 here. It's just everything you wanted as a Next Generation and Voyager fan put into one. And I love the ending of this. The homage they gave with the actor who played Chekhov. He plays a descendant of Chekhov, but he's named Anton Chekhov, so it's also honoring the late, great Anton Yelchin. Oh, man. They were the cavalry. Seeing the return of Data surprised me. I was not expecting that, and it makes the ending of Nemesis better knowing that he comes back. And that final battle is just amazing. It's just heartfelt because it does what other reboots fail to do. The other ones just disrespect the past, disrespect and just crap all over the legacy of the characters. This makes you go through the motions of them being killed off, but they don't do it. It's a satisfying end. It's filled with a lot of love when we get to see our favorite characters back one last time, saving the galaxy, saving the Federation, saving planet Earth against the remnants of the Borg. It's just some awesome stuff here, and then Picard getting over his past and accepting that he has a son and being there for him, It's a beautiful ending, and I hope we do get a Star Trek Legacy show, but yeah, this was definitely the best Trek I've seen in years. Star Trek 2009. This film, I think, is my favorite. I love all the films, but this film, never before have you had a film that's a prequel, reboot, and a sequel at the same time. I love how they don't erase the past. This is an alternate timeline with a Kelvin timeline with Ambassador Spock and Nero going through this black hole created by the red matter, and then seeing the events that unfold. Kirk losing his father in this timeline. Spock is a bit different in many ways. Nero destroys Vulcan, and that never happened in the original ones. Spock losing his mother and like almost his whole people. He's an endangered species, basically. Eric Bana does great as Captain Nero, and it's awesome seeing the younger cast members embody the characters from the original show while making it their own, especially Chris Pine as Kirk. I love the stuff with the Kobayashi Maru finally being seen, him and Spock. It's interesting that they start off as like bitter rivals before becoming the best of friends. There's just something so real and poetic about that. And when I first saw this, I had no idea they were going to have Ambassador Spock, Leonard Nimoy. And when they had that was just mind-blowing to me. And I love everything they did in this movie. It made it faster paced. This ain't your daddy's Star Trek, to say the least. I like seeing younger Kirk in them again. It's like, hey, here's the original series, but if it was faster and a bigger budget. And going forward, if they make more of these, I hope they have more original tales and maybe get more to the philosophical side of Star Trek with a blend of the fast-paced action and flares here. And flares, speaking of flare, yes, this does have a lot of lens flares. And in my opinion, I think J.J. Abrams did a better job on Star Trek than on Star Wars. I like his Star Trek movies much better. They feel more like Star Wars movies. I'm a more of a Star Wars guy, but Star Trek, I just love what they do here with the story, and it's just an interesting alternate timeline. It's just one of my favorites because of that, because nowadays you get stuff that just disrespects the legacy of what came before. This doesn't erase what came before. It just creates an alternate history, so to speak. And in many ways, I think it enhances the other films with what they do here. And I like the changes, and it's just one of my favorites because of that. Anyway, that's it for my favorite Star Trek films. Let me know your favorite Star Trek films down in the comments below. In the meantime, you can check out these other videos for more content. Live long and prosper, everyone. Till next time.